Good morning, Southside. Thanks for being here today. We're going to go on a little walk here together. We're in the town of Oregon, Illinois, about 3 hours north of Springfield. We're at a church camp that I grew up going to on a trail called Barber's Cliff Trail. And we're at a rock formation right now. And behind me you can see some of the wonderful acreage of this camp. This trail is actually named after the family that used to have a farm on this property before it was eventually turned into a Boy Scout camp, and then as it's used right now since the 1970s, a church camp. And it's a special place for me. I'm so glad I get to bring you here today because I think the visuals and the imagery of this rocky surface is going to really help reinforce what we're doing with our Polaroid summer right now as a church. I started coming to this camp when I was in elementary school, around 8 or 9 years old. And so it's neat to even come here 30 years later as a middle-aged man and see how constant this rock is.
And David uses that image of a rock in Psalm 62. And if you've got a Bible this morning, we're going to continue our series in the Psalms by considering this image of God. It's not just found in Psalm 62, it's all over the Psalms, Psalm 18 and 19 and 28 and all over the place. But it's kind of an interesting image. Rocks, they're not very inspiring, honestly. They're kind of dusty. They can impede progress. If you're trying to build a road, you have to go around them or through them. They're sometimes annoying if you get a little rock in your shoe and it irritates you. Frankly, a lot of times we use rock as an image for negative things, like sometimes it's people who are intellectually challenged. They are as dumb as a box of rocks. Or somebody who's in an impossible situation is between a rock and a hard place. We use it for even the worst places of life. I've hit rock bottom. So what does it mean to David that God is like a rock?
As someone who's lived in central Illinois my entire life, I'm pretty used to not very cool features in the land around me. I mean, the coolest thing I've seen in Springfield is probably Centennial Hill, and that's man-made, so there's not much going on there. But since I'm used to just everything being flat and boring, when I do go outside of Springfield, maybe up north or into Indiana, I get to see a lot more cooler things. For example, I've been going to Turkey Run State Park for years and years. It's in Indiana. Just very cool rock formations, just paths that you can go into. I went there when I was really young. My parents took me, and then years later, as a freshman in high school, I was able to go. Everything was the same. There may have been fallen trees that weren't there before, but everything was the same as I remembered. And then from freshman year to senior year, I waited 4 years and I went again. And all of the rock formations that I remember seeing, they were exactly the same. There wasn't the slightest bit of a difference. There may have been some new trees or new plants growing up, but the rocks that were there originally were there as I remembered them. Even when the last time that I went, I was walking on this rock part. It was a little wet, and I slipped and fell, and my dad tried to save me, of course, as a dad should, but in doing so, he fell and landed in some rocky water and ended up breaking his thumb. And even though my dad fell and broke his thumb, those rocks stayed the same. Apparently, the rocks changed him more than he changed the rocks. But just showing through all those years, all this time passed, and just my short lifetime, everything has been consistent. The rocks have been consistent. And that's important when we're talking about God as being a rock, showing how God is consistent. And as we look into Psalm 62, right away in verse 2, we can see where David is talking about the consistency of God being a rock. It says, "He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I will never be greatly shaken." And if we emphasize on the never, he is saying that he will never change when he is with God, the consistent rock. Not only is it found in Psalm 62, but if we look in other places in the Bible, for example, Numbers 23:19, God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? This is showing that time and time again, God is consistent. God is never changing. If he is there with you on day one, he'll be there with you on your last days. And that is inspiring. It can be sometimes tough to think that, and when we have changes in our life, when we go through times of uncertainty, of difficulty, that God is with us. Not only is he with us, but he is there for us, and he will not waver, he will not change no matter what, even though sometimes it can feel like that. And another verse found in Isaiah, get to that. Then, let's see, Isaiah 43:10 says, "You are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me." There's another example of how God has been consistent through the ages. There is no God before him, there is no God after him. It is only him. He is the only God. He is consistently with us. But even before time started, even before we were even formed, God has been there and God has been consistent.
And that idea of consistency definitely gets at it. But I think there's also an element of reliability. When we see this image of God as a rock, we know that he is reliable. We see that even written right here in verses 3. With David sort of questioning maybe even his own reliability. He says here, "How long will you assault a man? Would all of you throw him down? This leaning wall, this tottering fence?" David's being very vulnerable here and acknowledging the fact that he maybe doesn't feel as reliable as maybe he should. Despite the fact that even as a boy, when he went into battle with Goliath, that God was there as an unshakable source in his life. As a king, David would know what it was like to be kind of in political turmoil with people assailing him and working against him and infighting and just the drama that goes along with all things political and being in a position of significant leadership like king. So for him to be vulnerable and expose that idea of a leaning wall or a tottering fence. And I even wonder maybe with everything that's going on now if you've ever felt that or if people around you have felt that. This sort of unreliability, shaky nature of life is coming forth now maybe in the life of the primary earner for a home suddenly being furloughed. That's significant. That's what it means to feel kind of unreliable, that the circumstances around you aren't working in your favor. It's people who, because of the color of their skin, have been disenfranchised, who've had the system working against them. They know what David's feeling here. They need a God that is reliable, a rock that can be their foundation. Even thinking through what it means to be a parent at home, doing a job and doing schooling these past couple of months before summer started. They know what it feels like to need some sort of stability. And that's what David is painting a picture of here in Psalm 62. The idea that God is reliable. They fully intend to topple him from his lofty place. They take delight in his lies. With their mouths they bless, but in their hearts they curse. Have you ever felt like somebody or something or even a system was working against you? Luckily, we have access to a God who is reliable. As reliable as the rock that I'm sitting on here right now. I think about the hiking that I've done here around these trails. I think of the hiking that I've done out in Colorado, all sorts of beautiful places. As you're looking for sure footing, and Evan even alluded this to a little bit earlier when he started to slide on that rock. When you're looking for sure footing, if you have a choice between maybe an old root or a rock, you choose rock. If there's a little bit of sand or some dirt sediment there or a rock, you choose rock. If there is a chance for you to place yourself upon a rock, you do, because it is reliable. That's not unlike the teaching that we see in Matthew chapter 7, when Matthew talks about the wise and the foolish builders. He says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words," this is in verse 24, "these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock." The words of encouragement that we get today from Psalm 62 is that we have the ability to place our life on that firm foundation. David uses this wonderful imagery, this salvation, this hope, this rock.
What does it mean that God is a rock? Certainly it talks about his consistency, it speaks to his reliability for sure, but maybe what it's referring to is that God is strong. He is unmovable, he's stable. I've wondered a little bit about the beginning of this psalm, Psalm 62, verse 1, where David offers what seems to be a paradox. He says, "Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation." And I've wondered, how in the world can David rest on a rock? That seems like a very uncomfortable situation. Of course, this has been in my mind for the last several weeks. My wife and I have been shopping for a new mattress for our home. I think we last bought our mattress during the Clinton administration and are starting to feel some more aches and pains as we get up in the morning. So we began the process of looking for a new mattress, and there are billions of options out there. I had no idea. So I talked to people who sold mattresses. I've looked at online reviews. I've talked to some of you about which is the best, what would be the most comfortable. And ultimately what I did was I talked mostly to Jody. Now, I love a really soft mattress, memory foam, sink down into it like a cloud. My wife, Jody, hates that. She wants firm. She wants coils. And so ultimately we settled on something a little bit in between those two things. But maybe that's what David's referring to here. Maybe in a sense he doesn't want to be someone living on memory foam, sinking down in it. He wants something firm. He wants a stable, secure foundation, something to lay on. And in that, he rests. God is not going to be weakened when life puts on its pressure. Instead, God is stable. He's steadfast. He's strong. Now, not everyone likes a firm, strong foundation like God provides. David in Psalm 62 would go on to describe some people who have more of a memory foam kind of experience. In verse 9, for instance, he says, "Surely the lowborn are but a breath, the highborn are but a lie." In other words, people are vulnerable, regardless of whether you're an ordinary, everyday person, sort of lowborn as he talks about, or even if you're a highborn person. We're vulnerable. We need a foundation, something secure to be on. The truth is, if COVID has reminded us of nothing else, it has to be this, that everybody is vulnerable. We can all be toppled and knocked over. And yet some people, they try to live their life as if they're self-secure, self-reliable, as if they're not living on the rock. He goes on to say in verse 9, "If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together they are only a breath." In other words, all human beings, everybody, all of our lives are but a breath. I mean, try taking a moment to weigh your breath. Exhale on a bathroom scale. And what you get is the substance of our life. It's so small, it's so fleeting, it's so weak. And yet a lot of times we still try to put our trust in the strength of our own selves. He says in verse 10, "Do not trust in extortion or put vain hope in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them." People do all the time, and it's like memory foam. We sink right down into it. There's no firm foundation. But David says he can rest in a God who is strong, the rock. And the more I think about it, I think all of these images about rock are all very much true. That God is consistent. He is reliable. He is strong. But maybe the most impactful thing that this image brings to bear for us is that God is trustworthy. In verse 7, I think David highlights this the strongest. He says, "My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in Him at all times, you people." We must trust in the one who cannot be moved. Is that where your trust is? Even in the midst of the craziness we're experiencing together, even in all the transition and the plans that have changed, is that where your trust lies? In the rock.
So for the past few months, obviously things haven't been going as planned. Like for me as a senior in high school, I missed out on my baseball season and missed out on the musical that I was going to participate in. And through all of that, it's just been really unstable, and we really don't know what's coming next.
My guess is that so many of you have been through a lot of scary and shaky circumstances, anything less than a rock-like experience over the last few months.
So today we want to give a time and a place in this service for you to just sort of think through your answer to this question. When have you seen God as a rock? David does a good job penning his thoughts here in Psalm 62. And at a first read through, you're probably going to find yourself either aligning with this concept of God being someone you can trust, or the tough circumstances that David outlines. But let's focus on that trust aspect right now. It has been great being out here with these guys today and with you, church. Thanks for coming to the special place with me. Right now, I think we can use this time and this space and this service to actually answer that question, not just in your head, but utilize this tool we have here on Facebook. For those of you that are live streaming with us right now in the chat feature, why don't you answer that question? When have you seen God as a rock? You can be specific about circumstances. You can be specific about how faithful God was, but there's something powerful in telling this story. This is a tool of testimony. This is a chance for us to even worship God through being mindful of the times that He has been faithful. So as you see God, who is consistent, who is reliable, who is worthy of our trust, why don't you go and put those comments down. Psalm 62. Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him. Truly He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. How long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down, this leaning wall, this tottering fence? Surely they intend to topple me from my lofty place. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but in their hearts they curse. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from Him. Truly He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. Surely the lowborn are but a breath, the highborn but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together they are only a breath. Do not trust in extortion or put vain hope in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. One thing God has spoken, two things I have heard. Power belongs to you, God, and with you, Lord, is unfailing love. And you reward everyone according to what they have done.